Chess lovers, in this video, I'm going to show you the best ways to punish the weakest point in the enemy's position. What is that point? The f7 square. And do you know why? Because it's the only point in the entire opponent's position that's only defended by the king. So pay attention, because this video is going to fascinate you. The first way is one of my favorites. When we play the double king's pawn, we simply continue with knight f3 and knight c6. As you can see, the most used moves in the history of chess. Therefore, you can use this little trap in most of your games, and we'll continue with the Scotch opening. On this channel, we've seen many times that the best way, without a doubt, for black to continue here is pawn takes pawn, because otherwise it lets us capture, it lets us advance. So you're always going to find that they capture this pawn. There are many moves available here: knight takes pawn, bishop c4, c3, but we're going to propose an excellent move. Knight g5 gives me goosebumps. Whenever I play this move, they fall into the trap. Do you know why? Because they see this knight going alone, and when a piece goes alone on the attack, everyone knows it can't do anything at all. So what do they always do to me? This move right here, h6, telling my knight, hey, don't get into enemy territory or I'll kick you out immediately. And we, instead of retreating, are going to use, boom, the knight sacrifice on f7 directly, winning the game. How can it be, chess teacher, that this sacrifice, if you don't have more pieces to attack with, wins the game? Well, it continues precisely in this way. It's very simple. King takes f7, we lure the king out. Logically, they must capture that knight. If they don't capture it, we're attacking the queen and the rook at the same time, so they would lose material. They must capture that knight, but they don't know what's coming. Simply, we come in with the queen, taking advantage of these gaps. See how we're given queen h5 check? This would allow the opponent to escape with the move g6. So we must make an intermediate move before queen h5, which is the final plan. What's the first move? This one here, bishop c4. Very good move. Now, when the king moves away, it's time to play queen h5. See the difference now? g6 isn't possible because we'd simply capture the pawn and the game would continue the same whether they play g6 or not. So the game continues with king e7. We come in with the queen and checkmate will be inevitable. I'll show you. Only move king d6. We continue threatening the king now with the bishop. Bishop f4 check, the king has to come up, and the game would continue with queen d5 check. They only have two options, both king b4 and king b6. Both would be checkmate with queen b5. This way I'm going to show you now is much more effective, because they might not fall for the first trap if they don't play h6, if instead of moving the king back, they move it forward. Even so, we're going to end up with a nice attacking position. But the thing is, this one I'm about to show you is the one I use most in my games. It is absolutely spectacular. We'll also stick with the Scotch opening, but when they decide to take the pawn, we'll play our gambit style, the Scotch gambit, which is likely a huge favorite for many of you, since it's also mine. There are several moves here. We've talked about them on the channel, like, for example, knight f6, bishop c5. They're the most popular ones, right? For instance, bishop c5 is the one I like to punish most because it's the one they use most often. What happens when they play bishop c5? Well, what we want to do is play c3. What we want is to open up the center. We're playing in a gambit style. The most common move is pawn takes pawn. Why are we giving away so many pawns? To open up lines and take advantage of our development. And this is where the effective sacrifice on f7 comes in. Bishop takes f7 is gonna win us the game. We threaten the king with a check. We give up the bishop. Why? Because now the queen comes in. Queen d5 check. An epic move that I'm sure many of you know. Check, we take the initiative. If they pull back, we take with check. If they go to e8, first we give this check to weaken this diagonal, and now we do capture the bishop. This intermediate move is important, very important. And now, for example, in many videos, we've seen what happens if they play d6. But what happens if they play queen e7? A dangerous move. They try to trade queens and target our e4 pawn. Should we defend it? No, we should capture this pawn with the queen. And this is epic. I'll explain why. Even if they take this pawn with check, right now our opponents are up a pawn. We're going to play king d1, and if they make any silly move like knight f6, we win the queen because we place the rook on the same diagonal as the queen and the king. But if they move it away, a good move, for example, trying to check the king, we simply cover up, and this king will never be able to castle again since it has moved, and this rook is going to come to the center, and we're going to attack with a lot of force. And watch out, because we're also threatening the rook on h8, which is practically impossible to cover since this square is covered by the knight and the queen, and this square is also covered by the queen. Therefore, once again, we've used the bishop sacrifice on f7 to win the game. This is without a doubt my favorite trap for sacrificing on f7. You're gonna love it. It'll remind you of a pretty familiar trap, but an improved version. We start with knight f3, knight c6, and indeed, the gambit we're using to make these sacrifices is the Scotch gambit, d4. It's a super strong gambit that we've talked about many times on the channel. The thing is that now, after bishop c4, with the typical response knight f6, which is the best for black, okay? We just saw what happens if they play bishop c5, okay? Let's see what happens with knight f6. I'm going to show you a trap that we've rarely seen on the channel. Knight to g5. What does this remind you of? Doesn't it remind you of the fried liver attack, the Fegatello attack? Right? We attack with the knight and the bishop on the f7 square. Well, this is an improved version of the Fegatello attack. All right, pay attention, okay? We're attacking the pawn on f7. How do they defend it? There's only one way. What is that way? Placing the pawn on d5, thus blocking this diagonal for our bishop. Then we do the following. We capture, and the recapture of knight takes pawn is already the ultimate mistake. And I'll explain why, because it's a bit different from the Fegatello attack, but it's much better. Here, we're attacking the knight. If they move, we advance the pawn and renew the attack again. But the real mistake is knight takes pawn, which is what's always been played against me when I use this opening. What is black thinking here? Knight takes pawn doesn't work now, which is the typical sacrifice of the fried liver Fegatello attack, right? Knight takes pawn, a brutal sacrifice, when the king takes queen to f3 and we take the knight. But what happens? Well, here, black isn't forced to take the knight and could make the wonderful move queen to e7 check. And when we block, they could take our bishop. Even if we block with a queen, they could do king takes knight. That's why the knight takes f7 sacrifice wouldn't work now. So, chess teacher, why are you sacrificing the pawn? What's the point of this attack now, if we can't continue? Well, yes, the excellent move here is this one right here, castling. Wonderful move. Why is this move so good if what you're doing, chess teacher, is losing a tempo? Well, we can afford to lose this tempo because there's no way to cover. We move the king from the center and bring in the rook. So since there's no way to cover, we can afford the luxury of castling. What do they want to do? Castle quickly. That's why they always play bishop to e7. They threaten the knight with two pieces and allow themselves to castle on the next move. But now, once castled, and remember this detail well, whenever you're castled, knight takes f7 is a lethal move, completely lethal. In this case, we threaten the queen and we threaten the rook. They can't do queen to e7 because of the bishop, but it doesn't matter. If they'd done another, it wouldn't work either because the king isn't in the center, so it wouldn't be check and we'd take the rook. That's why they must take now. Notice the difference, right? Once castled, they must take. And now the lethal move obviously is queen to f3. As you can see, it's an improved fried liver or Fegatello attack. We attack the king and we attack the knight. It wouldn't work to cover with the king because we have the rook to threaten from here, right? It would be too dangerous. So here the most common move, logically, is to block the check. We can recover the piece, and in fact we do. We've recovered the piece, but so far, chess teacher, we've given up a piece and all we've done is get it back. So absolutely nothing has happened here. Black is exactly the same. Well, no. We're much better off here because our attack is lethal. The king is in a terribly bad position, while we are in perfect condition. And here the game would continue in the following way. If the king moves, we'd keep coming in with the rook and the bishops. But the most common move is to block with the bishop, trying to eliminate one of our attacking pieces. Careful, I don't blame them. It looks like a good move, but at this point, they can't do anything to stop our attack. For example, what are we going to do? We exchange the bishop to draw the king a bit more toward the center, so that we can bring a new piece into the attack. Which piece is that? The rook. Rook 1 check. Where does that king have to go? Well, if it goes this way, it starts getting dangerous because we'll come in with the bishop. Whenever you can bring in an extra piece, threatening the king and gaining time, you should do it. But the most common thing here is for them to try to take cover behind their bishop to bring the rook over, do an artificial castle, and avoid all the problems. But when the king is in a precarious situation, we always have moments and ways to take advantage of it. In this case, how could we do it? Well, for example, by making a double attack and a cross attack. Queen b3, excellent move. It attacks the king and also attacks the pawn. As you can see, at the very least, we've already won a pawn. The king must move. For example, king f8, it really doesn't matter to us where it goes. He can't block the check because there's no piece there, which is why he has to move. And then we, for example, could capture this pawn. Would that be a good idea? We already have an extra pawn besides the good position. But not only that, we're also, for example, gaining tempos by attacking a knight that has to move. The king is in a bad spot, and this game will end up being won, for example, by playing bishop f4, also attacking this pawn, playing the knight here, or even here, and bringing the other rook to the center. The point is that our position is 1,000 times better than our opponent's. And all of that came thanks to our brutal knight sacrifice on f7. I'm sure the sharpest among you saw here, after knight f6, the lethal attack we're making with knight g5, a crushing attack. I'm sure many of you said, yes, d5 is a bad move. I just saw it because of pawn takes pawn and what we just looked at. But there's another move here, chess teacher, that you've overlooked. If we're threatening this point, well, I'll simply play knight e5. I defend it perfectly, and I also attack your bishop on c4, meaning you can't kick my knight out because I'll capture your bishop and tear you apart. So what should we do here, chess teacher? Is our whole attack over? No. And I love that you guys notice this because it means you're aware of all the opponent's options. If you notice it, the opponent will too, and we'll be able to reach these positions. When they attack your bishop, what should we do? Simple. Let's use chess logic. What do we want to attack? This point on f7, where we can place the bishop to keep attacking, but placing it on a square where they can't capture it. Simple. b3, right? I'm still threatening f7 with the bishop and the knight, so now if they're careless and, for example, play d6, well, I've simply won the game. How? Well, first by kicking out the knight, and when it moves, taken here. You get it, right? So here they might fall for this trick, not realize it, and think that this knight is well defended. If they do something stupid, whether it's this, whatever, we kick the knight and we move in. But of course, here they might not waste any time and tell you to get out before it's too late. Kick this knight out and end up in a better spot. That's what everyone thinks. But careful, careful, because here we're threatening something very strong. We're threatening the following. Friends, f4. What a move. We let them capture the knight if they want. I mean, well, not if they want. They must capture it. I'll explain why. If they don't capture it, I mean, if they want to move theirs away, simply what happens? We move in with the fork, since our bishop is still doing its job. Therefore, here, what should they do if they can't move the knight? Logically, they only have one move, capture our knight. They have no other choice. You see it, right? So what should we do? Capture theirs. It's true that now our knight isn't being sacrificed on f2, it's sacrificed over here, and you'll see why. Right now we're attacking this knight, and let's think about where it can go. Not here, because the queen is there. It could go here, but it's a bit sad. Then we threaten it, right? And the knight would be lost, wouldn't it? It could probably come here, but, well, it doesn't look great. But I'm telling you from experience that here, when you capture it, they say, well, rather than going to a very bad spot, I'll just take your d4 pawn. That's obvious. Besides, if they come here, we could also continue exactly the same way now that I think about it. Queen takes b4. Very good move. We threaten the knight. They could play d5. Doesn't seem like the best idea, because after the en passant capture, we'd keep threatening the knight and keep threatening many more things. For example, castling, and we'd have the whole attack ready. That's why here, what they usually do is two things. Either knight c5, which seems like a good move because it's well defended, or the trickier ones play knight g3. I run into it a lot. They threaten your rook and this knight can't be captured. Why? Because we'd lose our wreck. See? That's why they say, well, I'll put the knight here, but this is a mistake. This is a mistake. And if they try to be too clever, we're going to punish them even more, which I love. How are we going to do it? Come on, I'll let you think for 3 seconds. Come on. And that's it. I'm not going to let you think anymore. The idea is to keep the pressure on this point with queen f2. Logically, here we've already won the game because we're threatening checkmate. So the priority for our opponent is to stop the checkmate. Double attack on the mate and the knight. Therefore, if they stop the mate, we take the knight and we've won a free knight for trying to be a show off. And if they try, for example, to defend with the knight itself, here the knight isn't defended by anyone because the bishop is blocked. So one way or another, they'd end up losing the knight. Sure, chess teacher. I mean, if they're very risky and play knight g3, perfect, I'll pull the trick on them. But of course, what happens to me is that they won't play knight g3, they're not that good. Or maybe they've seen the continuation and play the logical knight to c5, which looks much better. It certainly is, but don't worry because I have a recipe to punish it in a brutal way. We castle, look how simple, and we put pressure on the f7 square, which is the key point of this video, right? With the rook and with the bishop. Practically, we're forcing our opponent to capture our bishop, they get the bishop pair, they capture here, they double our pawns. However, here we have a much more advantageous position, especially in development. We're castled, the rook points here, this pawn is weak, the queen is centralized and can't be easily kicked out. And besides, all of the opponent's pieces are on the 8th rank. They haven't done absolutely anything. Therefore, here, watch out, because we're also threatening the a7 square. And here I find the most typical mistake of the position. How would you defend this square? Well, here they play b6, threatening two things. First, blocking this, and second, threatening bishop to c5, winning our queen. See, giving us a tremendously effective skewer with the bishop. But here, they've already lost the game, just as you hear it, because we can simply play queen to d5, threatening the rook, but also threatening checkmate, thanks to our development advantage. We threaten checkmate, they must cover the checkmate logically. If they move the rook, we win the game. And when they cover the checkmate, with queen to e7, we simply capture the rook. So what exactly? That we have ended up with a completely clean rook advantage just for trying to be a bit too clever. And we will see you again tomorrow in the very next video, my friend. Goodbye!